Imagine going on a simple ski trip, only to disappear for months. No memory of where you've been, no explanation of how you traveled thousands of miles, and no idea why you woke up in someone else's clothes. Sounds impossible, right? But it happened. And Stephen Kabatsky wasn't the only one. Another man vanished, only to call his wife from across the country days later, still wearing his ski gear. And then there's the case of a boy who accepted a stranger's invitation, only to return 3 days later, with no memory of being gone. What's happening to these people? And could it happen to you? Stick around, because this story is about to change the way you see reality. In 1978, a young man named Stephen Kabatsky, 23 years old at the time, was a student at Hope College, a small Christian institution in Michigan. He was majoring in German and history, but unlike many of his peers at this conservative school, he had an adventurous spirit. Stephen was passionate about the outdoors, particularly skiing, and often took solo trips to explore nature. As February of that year rolled in, just months before his anticipated graduation, Stephen decided to embark on a solo cross-country skiing trip near Lake Michigan. The area he planned to traverse was part of what's known as the Michigan Triangle, an expanse of the lake with a mysterious reputation akin to the infamous Bermuda Triangle. Reports dating back to the late 19th century detailed strange disappearances within this region, fueling speculation and folklore. Stephen assured his family and friends that he would only be gone for the day. Given his extensive experience in outdoor excursions, no one thought twice about his plans. However, concern quickly set in when he failed to return as expected. The first clue to his whereabouts emerged when a group of snowmobilers in the area noticed an odd trail of ski tracks leading to the lake's edge. At the end of the trail, they discovered a pair of skis and 2 poles abandoned on the icy shore, the tracks stopping abruptly. There were no signs of someone venturing onto the frozen lake. No breaks in the ice, no further prints. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. Simultaneously, Stephen's friends and family realized he was overdue and reported him missing. The authorities swiftly connected the report to the snowmobiler's discovery, launching a large-scale search operation centered around the location where his equipment was found. Despite exhaustive efforts, no sign of Stephen surfaced. Searchers combed the landscape, yet the mystery only deepened when his backpack inexplicably appeared at the very spot where authorities had already searched. It had not been there before, an unsettling detail that left even investigators baffled. With no plausible explanation for his disappearance, the assumption was made that Stephen had wandered onto the ice, fallen through, and succumbed to the freezing waters. His family, though devastated, had no choice but to accept this grim conclusion. Then, 15 months later, an unthinkable event occurred. One evening, a knock sounded at the door of Stephen's father's home. When he opened it, he was met with the last person he ever expected, his son very much alive. Stephen had no recollection of what had transpired over the past year and a half. It was only upon seeing a newspaper inside his father's house that he realized so much time had passed. Stunned, his father asked how he had traveled over 700 miles from where he had last been seen. Stephen had no answer. He recalled waking up in a field near Pittsfield, Massachusetts, roughly 40 miles away from his family home. From there, he instinctively sought out his aunt's house, and she had brought him back. Strangely, Stephen was dressed in clothes he didn't recognize. He carried a backpack filled with unfamiliar items, maps, trinkets, and mementos from various locations across the country. Among them were indications he had traveled to San Francisco, Sacramento, Chicago, Utah, and other states. He had $40 in cash, new glasses, sneakers, and a t-shirt from a Wisconsin marathon in which he had no memory of participating. The only cryptic remark he made to the media before withdrawing from public attention was that he felt as though he had been doing a lot of running. To this day, what happened to Stephen Kabatsky during those missing 15 months remains one of the most baffling unsolved mysteries. A similar disappearance took place decades later. In 2018, Danny Philippidis, a 49-year-old firefighter from Canada, vanished under equally mysterious circumstances. A dedicated family man, Danny lived a fulfilling life with his wife and 2 children, He was also an avid skier and eagerly anticipated his annual trip with his fellow firefighters to Whiteface Mountain in New York. On February 7, 2018, Danny and his 7 colleagues enjoyed a day on the slopes, cutting through the crisp winter air. As midday approached, the group decided to take a break and head down to the lodge for lunch. Danny Philippidis was enjoying a perfect day on the slopes of Whiteface Mountain in New York. The annual ski trip with his firefighter colleagues was something he always looked forward to, and this year was no different. As the group decided to break for lunch, Danny opted to stay behind, telling his friends he wanted to squeeze in a few more runs before joining them at the lodge in about half an hour. His friends didn't think much of it and headed down to eat. Time passed, and before they knew it, an hour had gone by. Yet there was still no sign of Danny. Assuming he had either lost track of time or simply skipped lunch to continue skiing, they shrugged it off and continued their day on the slopes. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the resort began winding down operations, Danny's absence started to feel more alarming. His friends checked their phones, expecting a message from him, but there was nothing. Now genuinely concerned, they decided to head back to the hotel to check his room. Since the lodge was attached to the resort, it was only a short walk. Knocking on his door yielded no response. Worried, they circled to the back of the hotel and found his car still parked in the lot. Now alarmed, they alerted the hotel staff and gained access to his room. Inside, they found his belongings untouched, his wallet, passport, cash, everything exactly where he had left them. Danny had seemingly vanished into thin air. Authorities launched an exhaustive search effort, combing the mountain and questioning anyone who might have seen him. However, despite the crowded slopes that day, not a single person recalled spotting him after he parted ways with his friends. Adding to the perplexity, the thick snowfall that morning made it highly unlikely that he could have wandered far. And yet he was gone. With no evidence of foul play and no plausible explanation for his disappearance, investigators eventually suspended the search. The harsh winter conditions led them to believe that he had succumbed to the elements, and his body would likely be found once the snow melted. It was heartbreaking news for his family, who were left grieving an inexplicable loss. Then, just days later, everything took a surreal turn. Danny's wife was at home, struggling to adjust to her new reality, when her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but she answered and instantly froze. The voice on the other end was unmistakable. It was Danny, but something was wrong. His voice was weak, confused. He sounded disoriented. "Danny, is that you?" she asked, barely able to believe it. I don't know where I am," he mumbled. "I don't know how I got here." Panic surged through her. She urged him to call the police immediately. After some hesitation, he agreed and hung up. When authorities received Danny's call, they struggled to make sense of what he was telling them. He was confused, uncertain about his surroundings. As they worked to pinpoint his location, the truth became even more staggering. Danny was in Sacramento, California, nearly 3,000 miles from where he had disappeared. When officers arrived to collect him, the scene was beyond bizarre. Danny was still wearing his full ski outfit, jacket, pants, boots, even his goggles perched atop his head. But there were strange details that made his reappearance even more unsettling. His hair had been freshly cut. He had a brand new smartphone, an iPhone he didn't own before. But he had no wallet, no ID, no money. Everything he had owned in New York was still sitting untouched in his hotel room. Authorities were left with more questions than answers. How had he traveled across the country without money, transportation, or identification? Who had cut his hair? Where had he gotten the phone? And why had no one, in all that time, raised concerns about a visibly disoriented man still dressed in ski gear? To this day, neither Danny nor anyone involved has been able to explain what happened during the days he was missing. It remains one of the strangest unsolved disappearances in modern history. But it wasn't the only case of its kind. A story documented in an official American ethnology report from 1897 to 1898 details a similarly eerie event. Though the exact location remains uncertain, speculation points to somewhere in Ireland, Scotland, or Wales. The story centers on a 12-year-old boy who had been playing by a river near his home. with a handmade bow and arrow. He spent the afternoon practicing his aim before growing bored and turning his attention to the water. He knelt by the stream, carefully stacking stones to form a makeshift dam, hoping to catch fish. As the boy sat by the river, stacking stones to create a small dam, he became aware of someone approaching. Looking up, he saw a well-dressed man emerging from the forest. The stranger had a warm demeanor, and after a brief conversation, he extended an invitation. "If you'd like," the man said, "you can take a break and join my family for a meal. My home is just up past the bend." The boy hesitated. He had spent countless hours exploring these woods, yet he had never seen any house in the direction the man pointed. But something about the stranger put him at ease. It was a different era, and though caution toward strangers existed, the boy felt compelled to accept. Besides, he recognized someone familiar, a close family friend, sitting on the porch of the supposed home, chatting with another person. The sight reassured him, and he followed the man. The cabin itself was lively. Laughter filled the air as children his age played inside. The meal was delicious, the company warm. Exhausted from the day's activities, the boy dozed off, lulled by the comfort of his surroundings. When he woke, the morning sun was peeking through the windows. Panic set in. He hadn't meant to stay overnight. His family would be worried sick. He rushed to gather himself, and as he prepared to leave, the man who had invited him in was already awake. "Can you show me the way back to the river?" the boy asked. "I'll walk with you part of the way," the man replied. The journey back was scenic. On one side stretched a lush orchard, on the other a sprawling cornfield. The boy took in the golden glow of the rising sun, marveling at the landscape. But something gnawed at him. None of this looked familiar. Had he wandered farther than he thought? At a fork in the path, the man stopped. "Just keep straight," he instructed. "You'll find your way back to the river." The boy nodded, thanked him, and continued forward. But after a few steps, something made him turn back. His stomach dropped. The orchard was gone. The cornfield had vanished. In their place stood a dense, shadowy forest. There was no sign of the cabin or the stranger. Before he could process what was happening, movement caught his eye. A group of people running toward him. As they drew closer, he recognized familiar faces. His family friend. "We found you," they shouted. Confused, the boy responded, "I was just with you last night. Why are you looking for me?" The family friend looked at him, bewildered. "You've been missing for 3 days." The boy's mind reeled. That wasn't possible. He had only spent a single night at the cabin. But as he pointed back toward where it once stood, his family revealed something chilling. "Since you disappeared, we've been hearing drumming," one of them said. "A strange, rhythmic beat coming from that part of the forest. No matter how much we searched, we could never find the source." The boy's breath caught in his throat. The drumming, they told him, had just stopped the moment he reappeared. To this day, no one knows where he went, who the stranger was, or how time had slipped away. People vanish every day. Some are never seen again. But what about the ones who come back, with no memory, no explanation, and no sense of time? Could they have stepped into something beyond our understanding? A ripple in time? A glitch in reality? Or something even more terrifying? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more chilling mysteries like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Because trust me, there's always more to uncover.